Hello and welcome to this week's episode of myNewsWrap. Welcome to the anniversary episode. So we have now 9 episodes done and we are now in the 10th one. So it's kind of a little birthday. Okay, let's start. What happened in this week in the SAP and Microsoft ecosystem and in the world between? First of all, 2 more references to last week's wrap up on the financial report that SAP brought out after the 3rd quarter. There are 2 more articles that I want to bring to your attention. One is in the Financial Times about more generally about Christian Klein, and as the headline says, the details guy who has to fix SAP. So it really highlights a little bit the different point of view that Christian Klein has with respect to Bill McDermott, for example. So quite interesting read. Maybe if you click on the link, it might be behind a paywall in the meantime. So, I think you know the trick. Check Google Cache and look if there is some older version available where the paywall was not there. Then I have a second article by Diginomica that also came out this week by Dan Hewlett about Christian Klein, who gave an interview in Bloomsburg for Bloomsburg's, and seems that he caused some confusion around some statements he made. So also an interesting read, interesting analysis concerning SAP and their standing on the especially US market and the message towards the US market. So that was it from the, let's say, super high level area. Then there was one highlight in this week, which is kind of a quarterly highlight for me. And that's the SAP Coffee Corner talk with Holger Müller from Constellation R, who had a talk with Martin Fischer about the state of SAP. So they really, I think it was 1 hour episode. They really talked about everything from the Q3 financial reporting to cloud to customer experience or CRM, this area. Absolutely must listen to from my perspective if you are around the SAP ecosystem. So either you can listen to it on the usual way, SAP Coffee Corner Radio, or I also put in the link because those interviews are also streamed by Holger via Periscope. So if you are more a visual guy, you can watch Martin Fischer and Holger Müller chatting with each other. As I said, absolutely worth watching from my perspective. Then let's go to the area of SAP Cloud Platform. There was one news which even made the SAP Developer News edition be preponed to one day before, to Thursday, to yesterday, because Jürgen Müller announced that the SAP Cloud Platform trial was extended. As you know, the SAP Cloud Platform trial for Cloud Foundry was limited to 30 days plus I think 2 extensions up to 90 days. And now it's extended to 12 months. Having said that, if you take a look at the mechanics in helps.sap.com that I described, how or what you have to do in order to extend it to 12 months, it's basically you have to push the extend button 9 times more. So again, the mechanics stay the same. So every 30 days you have to kind of renew your trial, but now it's no longer renewable after 3 times, so after 90 days, but now after 365 days. from my perspective, okay-ish. So we have now not that limited trial. However, for me, it's a complete duct tape solution. So it's first of all, I do not understand why it took them so long to make this extension mechanic work 9 times more or 10 times more. That's if or something like that to correct. And second, it's still dead end. So there is no way to switch from trial to a productive version. So every prototype, every sandboxing that you do, after 12 months, it's over. So debatable. There was some chatting going on Twitter as usual, a lot of chatting, and well, as usual, SAP said that's the first step. And concerning the free tiering, that was also announced during DSAG. This is something that will probably come at SAP TechEd, and I'm curious what they will bring up there. How the free tiering will then look like. Nevertheless, at least this 90-day limitation is gone now. Then there is another thing that crossed my path concerning SAP Cloud Platform, more for the people who want to get an introduction, who want to start off in the field of SAP Cloud Platform. There was a SAP community call, so one format that the SAP community offers, and one of the SAP champions gave a virtual tour. It was David Ruiz Badia, who gave a nice tour around SAP Cloud Platform, stating unboxing the SAP Cloud Platform. From my perspective, it's really a very nice and comprehensive overview how SAP Cloud Platform works, what terminology is used, for example, as you can see here, what are global accounts, sub-accounts, entitlements, and so on and so forth, and how do they belong together. Unfortunately, it's restricted, as far as I have seen from the slides, to Cloud Foundry. So nothing about Kyma, nothing about ABAP. But nevertheless, I would say if you want to get an overview, take a look at this virtual tour by the SAP champion. Then let's move on to the cloud application programming model. There was one brand new blog article from the area of UI5, where they announced just of today a new sample in the GitHub repository of SAP, which is a full stack sample from UI5 using the cloud application programming model and OData version 4 plus draft. The code is available on GitHub. I had a first rough look at it. Yeah, it's an end-to-end example, and I think it's highly appreciated that OData v4 and draft mode are in there. The data model is not really complex, which, well, has some pros and cons. And what's a limitation that's also mentioned within the GitHub repository is there is no deployment in there. So it's just made for local execution, for local playing around, so no deployment to cloud platform. That's something that you have to keep in mind when you take a look at that. So it's not the complete story if you want to build an application, but some pieces, some essential pieces that you can use in order to get your stuff started. Then I want to do some kind of cross promotion. So I started another format. I decided, since Kyma is now available on SAP Cloud Platform, to really focus and learn or relearn Kyma. And I'm happy to invite you to join my journey. I will push out videos on a more or less regular basis, so I try to push them out well, every 2 weeks at least. But don't get me on that. That's not an an SLA, and I will really start from scratch. So I have already 2 episodes out, one about the introduction and one about how to set up Kyma and how to walk through this Kyma dashboard. And the next one will be deployment of a sample app. You will have it then available on YouTube. If you want to get updated, follow me on YouTube. You can follow me on GitHub. It's a repo that's laying there behind, or Twitter, LinkedIn. I will push my notifications out there once a new episode is available. Okay, then one or two last points about SAP Cloud Platform, focusing on Steampunk. There is one article by Andre Fischer about his RESTful ABAP programming generator in context of the currently running OpenSAP course on the RAP programming model. If you missed week 2, and there was quite some coding going on as far as I could see, you can give that a kickstart by using the generator in order to get all the artifacts, all the objects created. So I think that's also a nice way, if you've done it manually, now to check out what can this generator do for you, and how does it make your life easier. And last week I forgot to mention one blog. I had it in the GitHub repo, but I did not mention it in the session, so I want to redo that here. It's about an article or a quite lengthy blog which has a lot of references in there about ABAP custom code migration and from SAP S/4HANA to Steampunk. And there are, well, a lot of references in there all around this area of custom code migration, ATC, so ABAP Test Cockpit, and the ABAP environment. So if you are working in that area, I think that's definitely worth a look, because there are really tons of references in there. Then, before I head over to the Microsoft part of the house, I would like to highlight one further contribution of the SAP community. There was an SAP community call about efficient DevOps with SAP Cloud Platform that was hosted by Boris Zarske. If you're around the DevOps area in the SAP world, then you probably know Boris. I have not watched it, but I know Boris, and I'm quite sure that's a really cool session around the area of DevOps with SAP Cloud Platform. A lot of links are there, a lot of updated information, because this is a quite vibrant area at SAP. Now, let's switch to the Microsoft area. I have no general news about Microsoft, so nothing crossed my way this week. But I have quite some topics to say about Azure Functions. Last week I said Azure Functions will receive a new functionality, namely retry policies, handling errors and do retries. And I said the rollout would take some time. Now we are here. Stuff was rolled out, it's available. And you can now use retry policies, at least in a preview version, with your Azure Functions. Documentation is updated, documentation is out, so have fun with that one. Last week I also announced the availability of creating Azure Functions with the OpenAPI specification, or using the OpenAPI specification. And that was already documented last week. The tooling was updated within Visual Studio Code. And there is now already one post from the functions team that gives you a little guidance, a little example on how to make use of that tooling, and how, let's say a little bit how the mechanics work behind the scenes, what to expect from this functionality. Then another really cool example of how to make use of Azure Functions, namely combining Azure Functions with Azure DevOps in order to create release notes out of Azure DevOps. So scenario is you have your repository and your pipelines within Azure DevOps. You use the wiki that's available within Azure DevOps in order to document your project and in order to create release notes. And now this blog guides you through creating these release notes in an automatic way by triggering an Azure function when certain branches are merged, and then extracting all the relevant information from the Scrum board for the for the user stories and so on, and for the bug fixing, and transferred it to the wiki in Azure DevOps. I think that's really quite usable because this is something that's always not the task that any developer wants to do. And if you can automate that, I think that's quite cool. And again, Azure Functions for the win. Then I have one further thing about Azure Functions. If you have not yet started with Azure Functions, that's sad. But there is now another format that will make your life easier to start with Azure Functions, and that's the so-called Azure Functions University. That is a community initiative triggered by Mark Dwicker and Gwyneth Peña Seguenza. I hope I pronounced it correctly. Both are kind of rock stars in the Azure Functions area. They already brought out quite some content, and now they joined together and have a very cool initiative around learning Azure Functions from scratch. That's really cool. And what's also cool, it's not a gated approach. So you can open up issues if you want to learn something specific. You can make proposals. Hey, I would learn more about this and that. And you can also open up issues if you want to host a session. So contribute and do the session with those two superstars on whatever is there around. It's described here within the GitHub repo. So how to contribute. They have a guide for that. At the end of the day, open up an issue, and if you want to make a contribution, and then Mark or Gwyneth will get in touch with you. There is already one session out about HTTP triggered functions. So level 1 is out. Looking forward to upcoming episodes of this format. Then one last thing about Azure Functions, namely Azure Durable Functions. If you're working with Azure Durable Functions, there is one thing that you probably have seen when you took a look how Azure Durable Functions work, especially concerning managing the state. So they do a lot within the storage area. So they store a lot of information in order to be able to handle this stateful approach within Azure Functions. And if you do that in a productive environment, the execution history will grow and grow and grow and grow, which means you have a lot of unnecessary stuff. If the execution was successful, you do not have to keep that up. And there is one blog post that describes how you can clean up these execution histories for Azure Durable Functions. It's for C#, but the basic concept can also be done via TypeScript or whatsoever. That was it from the Azure Function part. I have now two more general stuff that doesn't fit anywhere else. There is one very, very interesting and quite comprehensive article about creating Kubernetes clusters, so Azure Managed Kubernetes Clusters, AKS clusters, using Terraform. As you know, if you do infrastructure as code on Azure, you can use ARM templates. There is this new initiative, Azure Bicep, but it's now available in version 2.0 as I'm making this video. So there's quite some path to go until it's ready for productive usage. But you can also use Terraform. And this article now really describes not only how to set up your cluster, but really concerning a lot of configurations that you can and should do when you set up this cluster via Terraform templates. So I think valuable resource. Then one article that I simply want to mention that doesn't fit, well, that fits in both worlds, Microsoft and SAP, but it's from a completely different area. Maybe you know Container Solutions. That's one of the, let's say, go-to consulting companies when it comes to containerized workloads. And they brought up a nice area on their homepage that's called What the Fuck is Cloud Native? I think worth reading, worth watching the videos, because there's a lot of buzz around cloud native, but well, I think we are not all talking about the same when we say cloud native, and that's nice that they try to kind of set a baseline. Then let's switch to the area of education and sessions that come up. There is one session that I want to draw your attention to about SAP integration. It's, well, in German, so in German language. It's about SAP on Azure concerning the success factor of, not success factors, success factor of integration. So focusing really on this integration topic when it comes to combine SAP on Azure. It's on the 11th of November. You can register for free on Eventbrite. It's done by a consulting company called Quebec that is located in Hamburg. So I was once in a webinar of them. I enjoyed it, so I think I will also go there, and that's why I wanted to highlight that one. Then more generically, if you are around the Azure developer ecosystem, there is one Azure Developer Community Day coming up in December. It's usually announced in all Azure Dev meetup groups. I have here now linked the one from Munich. And this is 1 day of learning, of exchanging as far as that's possible in this virtual formats. There are different topic tracks. One is Cloud Native and Serverless. One is IoT, collaboration and no-code, and an open track. And you can register. It's on the 8th of December. So starting when SAP TechEd starts. Okay, so there's a parallel event, but well, it's up to you where to join. And if you want to learn .NET, there is now a .NET Learning Challenge out that was announced on 1st of November with over 40 hours of free learning around C#, .NET, Blazor, static web apps, and so on and so forth. So if you want to dig deeper into the .NET ecosystem, which I would recommend from my perspective, so I'm definitely not a connoisseur of the .NET ecosystem, but what I have seen is really cool stuff. So if you want to dig into that, well, that's the area. Now, there is another event coming up hosted by GitHub. It's GitHub Universe. It's also in parallel to TechEd. Well, it's all around GitHub development with GitHub, secure development. It's about DevOps. It's about open source communities. Some sessions are already scheduled. Of course, it's for free. So I think will be quite some nice content coming up. So before I finish, I introduced a new section for this week because there are two things that I want to highlight, or there are two things that I would like to highlight, but there is no news on them. Maybe you remember that OpenSAP wanted to bring out an OpenSAP course around extending SAP processes with Microsoft Azure in October. We have now November. Nothing happened. It was postponed. It will be rescheduled. And in September they said, well, it will be rescheduled in the near future. And I picked it up in October because, well, near future is a kind of fuzzy statement. And they replied, well, at the end of October, so at the beginning of November, that the course is still on hold. Not the coolest message, to be honest. So if somebody from OpenSAP, if somebody from SAP is watching, this is something I never saw that before on OpenSAP. And I can guess that it's around politics between SAP and Microsoft. But we as developers do not really appreciate this. Next thing, I already said, there are some events in parallel to SAP TechEd, as I mentioned before. I would have loved to announce something about SAP TechEd, like that the schedule is available, that you can register, because it's only 1 month away. Well, I would have liked to. Nothing is here. So you can still just see some things, some basic pillars, what will be discussed, like integrated intelligence suite. So the high-level buzzwords are there, but no details, no nothing. So you can also not register. You cannot, as far as I have seen, you cannot, how shall I say, subscribe to a news channel so that you get push notifications when something happens. So from my perspective, really strange, because this is one of the, it's the biggest event. It's not one of the biggest events, it's the biggest event in the SAP ecosystem when it comes to technical education, when it comes to developers. Highly appreciated the Devtoberfest, great, but I mean the real thing usually in the year is TechEd, and having no information 1 month before the start is kind of a, from my perspective, kind of a strange message to the developers out there in the SAP ecosystem. Well, that's enough for ranting about education on the SAP side, but well, I really currently, honestly, frankly speaking, do not really get where SAP is heading with respect to developer education, because it's kind of strange. Nevertheless, I highly recommend you to educate yourself in that area, but some nice things would be appreciated around SAP and Microsoft and TechEd. Now, perhaps next week, let's see if I have some news there. Let's keep our fingers crossed. And one last thing from the area of productivity. One thing that we all looked forward to if we are working for different companies and have to go to and use Microsoft Teams with different accounts, different organizations. Starting in December, a new feature will be rolled out that makes your life much, much easier concerning using multiple accounts, using multiple organizations. So that was quite some hyped at Twitter because that is highly appreciated and was kind of overdue to come, because that's really a pain when you have to do so. Okay, with that last news that we are all looking forward in December, I thank you for joining, I thank you for listening, and well, I hope to see you next week. Until then, have a nice Friday, have a nice weekend, and bye.